To our amazing viewers at Cheating Tales Lab, welcome and thank you. Your presence makes these stories worth sharing. We'd love to hear, which part of the world are you joining us from? Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Diagnosis. Boyd Mitchell sat in the sterile oncologist's office, the words aggressive lymphoma echoing in his head like a death sentence. Dr. Patel's voice seemed distant as she explained treatment options, survival rates, and the astronomical costs ahead. Stage 3, she said. Treatable, but the road would be brutal and expensive. The treatment protocol I'm recommending will run approximately $400,000 over 18 months, Dr. Patel continued, her tone professional but sympathetic. Your insurance will cover about 60%, but you'll need to prepare for significant out-of-pocket expenses. Boyd nodded slowly, his weathered hands clasped tightly in his lap. At 52, he'd built a modest trucking business from nothing, working 18-hour days for 3 decades. His ex-wife Trina had called it blue-collar grunt work during their bitter divorce 5 years ago, walking away with half his assets to marry Curtis Brennan, a flashy car dealership owner she'd met at their country club. The irony wasn't lost on Boyd that his family, the same people who'd sneered at his dirty work, would now need to face the reality of what his illness meant. His mother Dolores had always favored his younger sister Laurel, the college graduate who married into money. His 2 children, Madison and Connor, now 19 and 17, had chosen to live with their mother after the divorce, seduced by Curtis's promises of designer clothes and expensive vacations. Walking to his battered Silverado in the hospital parking lot, Boyd pulled out his phone. Time to make the calls he'd been dreading. Mom, it's Boyd. I need to talk to you about something serious. Dolores Mitchell's voice was immediately guarded. What now, Boyd? I'm busy planning Laurel's wedding. I have cancer, Mom. Lymphoma. I'm going to need help with the medical bills. The silence stretched uncomfortably before his mother sighed. Oh, Boyd. You know things are tight right now. Laurel's wedding is costing us a fortune, and your father's retirement isn't what we hoped. Can't you get a loan or something? The dismissal in her tone cut deeper than the diagnosis had. A loan for $160,000? Mom, I might die. Don't be so dramatic. You've always been tough. You'll figure it out. You always do. The line went dead. Boyd stared at his phone, then dialed his sister. Laurel, it's Boyd. Oh my God, what perfect timing. Laurel's voice bubbled with excitement. I was just picking out centerpieces. Boyd, you have to see this venue. It's like something out of a magazine. Laurel, I have cancer. The enthusiasm died abruptly. What? Are you serious? Stage 3 lymphoma. I need help with treatment costs. Boyd, God, the timing is just awful. The wedding is in 3 weeks, and we've already stretched ourselves thin. Troy's parents are paying for most of it, but there are still so many expenses. Can't this wait until after the honeymoon? Cancer doesn't wait, Laurel. I know. Look, maybe after things settle down, we can help a little. But right now, her voice trailed off. I'm sorry, Boyd. I really am. Another deadline. Boyd's hands shook as he dialed his children. Madison answered on the 4th ring. Dad? What's up? Madison, I need to tell you something important. I have cancer. Oh no, Dad. Are you okay? Do you need us to come see you? For a moment, hope flickered. I'd like that. But I also need to talk to you and Connor about helping with medical expenses. The treatment is going to be expensive. Dad, you know Mom and Curtis are already paying for my college, and Connor's got his senior year expenses. Plus, Curtis just bought me a car, and we're planning this amazing graduation trip to Europe. Maybe you could ask Mom for help. Your mother has her own family now, Madison. I was hoping my children might. Dad, don't make this weird. You and Mom are divorced. Figure it out like adults. I gotta go. Curtis is taking us shopping for the wedding. The line went dead, leaving Boyd alone in the hospital parking lot with the weight of his family's indifference crushing down on him. Chapter 2. The Foundation. Boyd drove home to his modest ranch house on the outskirts of town, the same house where he'd raised his children before Trina decided it wasn't good enough anymore. The mortgage was nearly paid off, another testament to his practical nature that his family had always dismissed as lack of ambition. Inside, he poured himself 3 fingers of bourbon and sat at his kitchen table, surrounded by the documentation of a life built through sheer determination. Military discharge papers from his Army service, the original loan documents for his first truck, tax returns showing steady growth of Mitchell Transport, a business that now operated 47 trucks across 3 states. But they'd never seen the real Boyd Mitchell. His phone rang. "Boyd, it's Frank." Frank Delacroix had been Boyd's commanding officer in Afghanistan, now a security consultant for some very influential people. Their friendship had endured through decades and had opened doors Boyd's family couldn't imagine. "Frank, I'm glad you called. I need to cash in some favors." "What's the situation?" Boyd explained his diagnosis and his family's response. Frank listened without interruption, a skill learned in war zones where listening meant survival. "You know, I've got connections in medical research," Frank said finally. "There's an experimental treatment program at Johns Hopkins. Fully funded. I can make a call." "What's the catch?" "No catch for you." "But Boyd, are you sure about your family? Sometimes cancer changes perspectives." Boyd took another sip of bourbon. "They had their chance to show who they really are. They chose money over blood. Then we proceed as planned. The other matter we discussed last month. You still want to move forward?" Boyd had been considering a complete life change even before the diagnosis. Frank had connections in private security, government contracting, opportunities that would take him far from the family that had never valued him. "Yes, after Laurel's wedding. I want to see this play out first." "Boyd, you know I have to ask, is this about revenge?" Boyd stared at a family photo from Connor's 16th birthday, everyone smiling for the camera, while Curtis's arm possessively wrapped around Trina. His own children looking at Curtis with the admiration they'd once reserved for their father. "It's about truth, Frank. They need to see who they chose to abandon." After hanging up, Boyd spent the evening researching. Laurel's fiancé, Troy Kellerman, came from old money. His father owned a chain of high-end hotels across the Southeast. The Kellermans moved in circles where reputation was everything, where association with the wrong people could close doors permanently. Boyd smiled grimly. He'd always been underestimated, seen as just another working-class nobody. But 20 years of running a trucking business had taught him about leverage, about pressure points, about how the right information applied at the right moment could move mountains. His phone buzzed with a text from Laurel. "Boyd, please don't take what I said wrong. We're family. After the wedding, we'll figure something out. Red heart. Too little, too late." Boyd deleted the message without responding. Chapter 3. The Players. The next morning brought another call from Dr. Patel's office, scheduling his first chemotherapy session. Boyd arranged it for the day after Laurel's wedding. No point in being sick for what was about to unfold. He drove to his business office, a modest building behind his truck yard where his dispatcher Violet managed the daily operations. Violet had been with him for 15 years, knew his business better than anyone, and had become something of a surrogate mother figure since his divorce. "How'd it go with the family?" she asked, looking up from her scheduling board. "About like you'd expect." Boyd settled into his office chair. "Violet, I need you to handle something sensitive." He explained his plan to transition the business, the connections Frank was facilitating, and what it would mean for everyone who worked for Mitchell Transport. "You're sure about this, Boyd? This is your life's work." "My life's work was supposed to be my family. This business was just supposed to support that." He gestured toward the family photos on his desk. They made their choice. Violet studied him with the sharp intelligence that made her invaluable. "What do you need from me?" "Information. Troy Kellerman's father owns Kellerman Hospitality. Find out everything you can about their business relationships, their vulnerabilities. And I need you to reach out to some of our clients." Mitchell Transport didn't just haul freight. Over the years, Boyd had built relationships with companies that moved sensitive materials, medical waste, hazardous chemicals, specialized equipment. These relationships had made him privy to information about environmental violations, safety shortcuts, insurance fraud. Information he'd kept confidential because it was the ethical thing to do. But ethics were a luxury he could no longer afford. By afternoon, Violet had compiled a thick folder. "Boyd, are you sure about this? Some of this information, if it got out." "It won't get out randomly, Violet. But if someone forces my hand." His phone rang. "Trina." "Boyd, Madison told me about your diagnosis." "I'm sorry." Her voice carried the same patronizing tone he remembered from their marriage's final years. "Are you calling to help, Trina? You know our situation is complicated. Curtis has been so good to the kids, and we're trying to establish our life together. But maybe we could help a little, work out some kind of payment plan." "Where are you right now, Trina?" "At the boutique with Madison." "What? Which boutique?" Nordstrom. We're picking up our dresses for Laurel's wedding. Boyd, why are you asking? Boyd had driven past Nordstrom an hour ago, seeing the Porsche Cayenne that Curtis drove parked outside. How much did you spend today? That's not your business anymore. My daughter's college fund that you helped deplete to buy Curtis's boat. Was that my business? The line went quiet. Boyd, don't start this. I'm not starting anything, Trina. I'm finishing it. He hung up and turned to Violet. Make the calls. It's time people learned who Boyd Mitchell really is. Chapter 4. The Wedding Day. Boyd stood before his bathroom mirror, adjusting the tie of his only good suit, the same charcoal gray he'd worn to court during the divorce. His reflection showed a man who'd aged hard over the past 5 years, lines etched by stress and disappointment deepening around his eyes. The cancer hadn't started taking its toll yet, but he could feel its presence like a countdown timer in his chest. The invitation to Laurel's wedding sat on his dresser, elegant cream cardstock with gold embossing that probably cost more than most people spend on groceries in a month. The honor of your presence is requested. Honor. The irony wasn't lost on him. His phone buzzed with updates from Frank. The experimental treatment program was confirmed. Boyd would start at Johns Hopkins immediately after today's events concluded. More importantly, Frank's other connections had provided some interesting intelligence about the Kellerman family's business dealings. Boyd tucked a small envelope into his jacket pocket and headed for Willowbrook Country Club, the same venue where Trina had insisted on their wedding reception 22 years ago. Back then, she'd called it classy. Now he understood she'd meant expensive. The parking lot was a showcase of luxury vehicles: Mercedes, BMWs, Lexuses, and Curtis's ridiculous red Porsche that screamed midlife crisis, louder than a truck horn. Boyd's Silverado looked like a workhorse among thoroughbreds, which was exactly how he'd always felt around these people. Inside, the ceremony was everything Laurel had dreamed of: cascading flowers, string quartet, enough candles to illuminate a small city. Boyd took his seat in the back, noting how his mother had seated him away from the family section, as if his blue-collar presence might contaminate the elegance. Laurel looked beautiful walking down the aisle, her dress a creation of silk and lace that probably cost more than Boyd's monthly mortgage. Troy Kellerman waited at the altar, handsome in that soft way that came from never having calloused hands or worried about making payroll. But it was the sight of his own family that made Boyd's blood run cold. Trina sat in the third row wearing a stunning navy dress with subtle gold threading. Designer, definitely. Probably $13,000 if Boyd had to guess. Madison and Connor flanked her, both in coordinated outfits that looked like they'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. Curtis had his arm around Trina, playing the perfect stepfather, while Boyd's own children called him Curtis instead of Dad, and hung on his every word. As the ceremony progressed, Boyd watched his mother beam at Laurel while pointedly ignoring his presence. He watched his children laugh at Curtis's whispered jokes. He watched his ex-wife glow with the contentment of a woman who'd traded up successfully, and he felt the last vestiges of familial loyalty die in his chest. During the reception, Boyd nursed a bourbon at the bar and observed. Dolores made sure everyone knew how proud she was of Laurel, how wonderful Troy's family was, how excited she was to be connected to such quality people. Madison and Connor worked the room like young socialites, comfortable in a world that Boyd's sacrifice had purchased, but where he'd never been welcome. Boyd, there you are. He turned to find Robert Kellerman, Troy's father, approaching with a practiced smile and firm handshake. At 65, Robert carried himself with the confidence of inherited wealth and social position. Mr. Kellerman, congratulations on the wedding. Please, call me Robert. Troy's told me so much about Laurel's family. You're in transportation, I understand. The dismissive tone was subtle but unmistakable. Transportation. As if Boyd moved packages for Amazon instead of running a multi-million-dollar logistics operation. Something like that, Boyd replied mildly. And you're in hospitality. Hotels, yes. We operate throughout the Southeast. Premium properties, very exclusive clientele. Boyd nodded, sipping his bourbon. Must be challenging, maintaining standards across so many locations. It is, but we have excellent management. Quality control is everything in our business. Quality control, Boyd repeated thoughtfully. Yes, I imagine environmental compliance alone must be a nightmare. All those hazardous waste disposal requirements, the EPA inspections. Something flickered in Robert's eyes. We have excellent environmental consultants. I'm sure you do. Mitchell Transport handles waste management for several hotel chains. The regulations are incredibly complex. One small violation can shut down an entire property. Robert's smile became strained. Well, fortunately, we've never had any issues. Boyd smiled back. Of course not. If you'll excuse me, I should say goodbye to my family. But as he approached his mother's table, he overheard Dolores speaking to one of Troy's aunts. Oh, Boyd. He's my son, but honestly, he's never really fit in with the family. Blue-collar work, you know. Nothing wrong with it, but it's not really our world. Trina, that's his ex-wife over there in the beautiful dress. She's done so much better for herself. Curtis is in automotive sales, very successful. The children just adore him. What about Boyd's business? The aunt asked. Oh, it's just trucking. He drives trucks for a living. Boyd felt something snap inside him. 20 years of building an empire, of providing for ungrateful people who saw his work as beneath them, of sacrificing his health and happiness so they could live comfortable lives while dismissing him as a failure. He quietly left the reception and walked to his truck. Once inside, he pulled out his phone and made the call. Frank. It's time. Chapter 5, The Reckoning. Boyd's call to Frank lasted exactly 3 minutes. When it ended, he sat in his truck for another 5 minutes, letting the enormity of what he'd just set in motion settle in his mind. There would be no going back after tonight. He walked back into the reception just as Troy's father was beginning his toast to the happy couple. Robert Kellerman stood at the microphone, champagne glass raised, speaking about family, love, and the bright future ahead. Boyd positioned himself where he could see both his family's table and Robert's face clearly. Then he waited. It took exactly 18 minutes. Robert's phone buzzed during his toast. He glanced at it, frowned, but continued speaking. It buzzed again, and again. By the fourth interruption, his voice faltered. Excuse me just one moment, Robert said, stepping away from the microphone to check his messages. Boyd watched the color drain from the older man's face as he read, then watched him frantically start making calls, walking quickly toward the exit with the phone pressed to his ear. 5 minutes later, Robert burst back into the reception hall, his eyes scanning the crowd until they locked onto Boyd's. The panic in his expression was unmistakable. Robert crossed the room quickly, his composure completely shattered. Mr. Mitchell, I need to speak with you. Urgently. Is everything all right? Boyd asked mildly. Please. Outside. Now. They walked to the country club's terrace, Robert's hands shaking as he lit a cigarette with trembling fingers. I just received some very disturbing calls, Robert said, his voice tight. It seems someone has provided the EPA with detailed documentation of environmental violations at 3 of my properties. Violations that could result in criminal charges and the shutdown of my entire chain. Boyd nodded sympathetically. That sounds serious. The documentation is incredibly detailed. Waste disposal records, falsified inspection reports, bribery of local officials. The kind of information that would only be available to someone with intimate knowledge of hazardous waste transportation and disposal. The waste management industry is quite specialized, Boyd agreed. Robert's facade finally cracked completely. What do you want? Boyd finished his bourbon and set the glass on the terrace railing. I want you to understand who you've been dismissing all evening. I don't understand. Mitchell Transport doesn't just haul freight, Mr. Kellerman. We're one of the largest hazardous waste disposal companies in the Southeast. We handle medical waste, chemical disposal, environmental cleanup. Your hotels have been cutting corners for years, falsifying disposal records, bribing inspectors. My trucks have been cleaning up your messes, and my people have been documenting every violation. Robert's cigarette fell from his fingers. You've been watching us? I've been doing my job, which includes maintaining detailed records of everything we transport and dispose of. Records that, until tonight, I've kept confidential out of professional courtesy. What do you want? Robert repeated desperately. Boyd looked back through the windows at the reception, where his family was still celebrating, oblivious to the drama unfolding outside. I want you to go back in there and tell everyone exactly who Boyd Mitchell is, Boyd said quietly. I want you to explain that I'm not some truck driver who got lucky. I want you to tell them that Mitchell Transport is a $50 million a year operation that employs over 200 people. I want you to explain that I hold the fate of your family's business in my hands. And if I do that, then maybe those EPA reports get delayed in processing. Maybe some of that documentation gets reclassified. Maybe you get a chance to quietly fix your violations before anyone goes to prison. Robert's face was ashen. I didn't know. Your family, they said you were just. They said I was nobody worth knowing. And you believed them because it fit your prejudices about blue-collar workers. Boyd started walking back toward the reception. You have 5 minutes to decide, Mr. Kellerman. Either you go in there and set the record straight about who I am, or tomorrow morning every environmental agency in 3 states starts receiving very detailed reports about Kellerman Hospitality's illegal activities. Wait. Robert called after him. I'll do it. But please, you have to understand, I have employees I have. You have 5 minutes, Boyd repeated without turning around. Chapter 6. The Truth Revealed. Boyd positioned himself at the bar where he could watch the entire reception as Robert Kellerman returned, visibly shaken and pale. The older man approached the microphone with the hesitant steps of a man walking to his own execution. Excuse me, everyone. I'd like to add something to my earlier toast. The room quieted, guests turning their attention back to their host. Boyd noticed his mother and sister at their table, Trina and Curtis leaning in with interest, his children still absorbed in their phones. I've just had the pleasure of a more extensive conversation with Laurel's brother, Boyd Mitchell, and I realize I may have given some people the wrong impression about his career. Robert's voice cracked slightly on the last word. Boyd watched his family's faces begin to show confusion. Boyd, would you mind joining me up here? All eyes turned to Boyd as he walked slowly to the front of the room. He could see his mother's face flushing with embarrassment, clearly mortified that her truck-driving son was being spotlighted at such an elegant event. Ladies and gentlemen, Robert continued, his voice growing stronger as he found his rhythm. I want to make sure everyone understands that Boyd Mitchell isn't just in transportation. He's the founder and CEO of Mitchell Transport, one of the largest specialized logistics companies in the Southeast. Boyd watched his family's expressions shift from embarrassment to confusion. Mitchell Transport operates a fleet of over 50 vehicles and employs more than 200 people across 3 states. They handle some of the most complex and regulated transportation in our region: medical waste, hazardous materials, environmental cleanup operations. Dolores's mouth had fallen open slightly. Trina was staring at Boyd as if seeing him for the first time. But more than that, Robert continued, and Boyd could hear the strain in his voice. Boyd's company handles environmental services for major hotel chains, manufacturing facilities, and medical complexes. The kind of specialized work that requires extensive licensing, government clearances, and absolute discretion. Curtis was frowning now, clearly not understanding why his stepchildren's father was being praised at length. In fact, Robert's voice was getting more strained by the moment. Mitchell Transport has been absolutely crucial to maintaining environmental compliance for businesses throughout our region. Without their expertise and discretion, many of us would face serious regulatory challenges. Boyd stepped forward and took the microphone. Thank you, Robert. That's very kind. He looked out at the sea of faces, most of them strangers, but focused on the table where his family sat in stunned silence. I want to thank the Kellerman family for their hospitality tonight, and for giving me the chance to celebrate my sister's happiness. Laurel, you look absolutely beautiful, and Troy, you're getting an amazing woman. Polite applause followed, but Boyd wasn't finished. I also want to thank my family for helping me understand some important truths about myself and my priorities. His mother was shaking her head slightly, her face pale. You see, 3 weeks ago I was diagnosed with stage 3 lymphoma. I reached out to my family for help with medical expenses, about $160,000 out of pocket after insurance. The room had gone completely silent now. Trina's face was white, Curtis looked uncomfortable, and his children were finally paying attention. My mother told me things were tight because of this wedding. My sister said the timing was terrible. My ex-wife explained how stretched they were with their new life. My children suggested I figure it out myself, since they had Europe trips and new cars to think about. Boyd could see tears forming in Madison's eyes, but he felt nothing but cold satisfaction. But tonight, I've watched my mother spend more on flowers than I asked for help with. I've seen my ex-wife wearing a dress that costs more than most people make in 3 months. I've watched my children treat the man who replaced me like he's their hero, while I sit in the back like a stranger. Boyd. Dolores started to stand, but he held up a hand. I'm not finished, Mom. You see, Tonight I learned something valuable. I learned that my family's love was conditional on my perceived success. When you thought I was just a truck driver, I wasn't worth helping. But now that Mr. Kellerman has explained who I really am, I can see the wheels turning in your heads. Trina was crying now, Curtis's arm around her shoulders as much for his own comfort as hers. But here's the thing, it's too late. In 3 days, I start treatment at Johns Hopkins, fully paid for through connections most of you couldn't imagine. In 6 months, Mitchell Transport will be sold to a national company for more money than any of you ever dreamed I had. Boyd handed the microphone back to Robert, whose face showed a mixture of relief and terror. And as for my family, Boyd said, his voice carrying clearly across the silent room, you made your choice when you decided I wasn't worth helping. Live with it. He walked out of the reception hall, leaving behind a room full of stunned silence and one family finally understanding what they'd lost. Chapter 7. The Aftermath. Boyd sat in his truck in the country club parking lot, engine running but not yet ready to drive away. Through the large windows, he could see the chaos his revelation had caused. Guests clustered in animated conversation, his family huddled together at their table, and Robert Kellerman pacing near the bar with his phone pressed to his ear. His own phone started buzzing immediately. First call, Laurel, sobbing into the phone. Boyd, please come back inside. We need to talk. I didn't understand. You understood perfectly, Laurel. You understood that your brother wasn't important enough to help. That's not fair. You thought I was nobody, and you were comfortable letting me die as nobody. Boyd ended the call. Second call, Madison. Dad, please, we didn't know about your business. Mom never told us. Your mother knew, Madison. She took half of it in the divorce. She knew exactly what she was asking you to turn your back on. Dad, please. Boyd hung up and turned off his phone. The drive home took 40 minutes, giving him time to process what he'd just done. There was no satisfaction in it, no sense of victory, just the cold emptiness of finally seeing his family clearly and accepting what that meant. At home, he poured himself bourbon and called Frank. How'd it go? Frank asked. Like pulling off a Band-Aid. Quick and painful. The Hopkins program is confirmed. You start Monday. And Boyd, the other opportunity. Are you still interested? Frank had been developing a private security consulting firm, handling sensitive work for government contractors and Fortune 500 companies. The kind of work that paid exceptionally well and required expertise in logistics, personnel management, and absolute discretion. Exactly the skills Boyd had developed over 20 years. More interested than ever, Boyd replied. Good. Because I've been thinking about our conversation regarding your assets. The sale of Mitchell Transport. You might want to consider some creative structuring. Boyd understood immediately. Hidden assets. Legal hidden assets. Offshore consulting fees, intellectual property licensing, equipment leasing arrangements. Your family thinks they know what you're worth based on the business sale. But if most of your wealth gets restructured into consulting contracts and international operations, they'll never see a penny beyond what's already legally theirs. And your new career will provide income streams they can't touch or even discover. Boyd smiled grimly. His family had made their choice based on their perception of his worth. They'd assumed he was a simple man with simple assets they could calculate and claim. They had no idea how complex his business relationships really were, or how much wealth could be moved and restructured before anyone thought to look for it. Set it up, Frank. All of it. After ending the call, Boyd sat in his living room surrounded by 20 years of family photos. Pictures that now felt like evidence of his own naive hope that love and loyalty mattered more than money and status. His phone, still silenced, showed 47 missed calls and 32 text messages. He deleted them all without reading them. Tomorrow, he would start the process of disappearing from their lives as completely as they had disappeared from his when he needed them most. The cancer treatment would happen at Johns Hopkins under Frank's arrangement. Mitchell Transport would be sold through a complex deal that left Boyd wealthier than his family could imagine, but with most assets hidden in consulting agreements and international contracts. And when the treatment was finished, whether he survived or not, Boyd Mitchell the truck driver would cease to exist. In his place would be a man his family had never bothered to meet, wealthy, connected, and completely done with people who measured love by bank account balances. His doorbell rang at midnight. Through the peephole, he could see Trina standing on his porch, Still in her expensive dress, mascara streaked down her cheeks. Boyd poured himself another bourbon and went to bed without answering the door. Chapter 8. The New Life. 6 months later, Boyd stood on the balcony of his penthouse apartment in Georgetown, watching the Potomac River flow beneath the Key Bridge. The lymphoma treatment had been brutal but successful. Dr. Reyes at Johns Hopkins had declared him in complete remission just 2 weeks ago. The experimental therapy Frank had arranged had saved his life, while his family remained completely unaware of where he was or how his treatment had progressed. Frank joined him on the balcony, carrying 2 glasses of 20-year-old scotch. The Mitchell transport sale closed yesterday. Final numbers came in at $73 million. Boyd nodded without emotion. His family would learn about the sale through legal notices, along with the revelation that their anticipated windfall would be much smaller than expected. Most of the assets had been restructured months ago into intellectual property licensing deals, international consulting contracts, and equipment leases to companies that existed only on paper in countries with strict privacy laws. And the consulting work. 3 new contracts this month. The State Department job alone will net you more than Mitchell Transport made in its best year. Frank settled into a chair beside him. You've built something impressive, Boyd. Different from your trucking business, but just as substantial. Delacroix Mitchell Security Consulting specialized in logistics planning for sensitive operations. Everything from humanitarian missions in war zones to corporate security for Fortune 500 companies operating in hostile environments. Boyd's combination of military experience, business acumen, and absolute discretion made him invaluable to clients who paid premium rates for anonymity and results. Any word from home? Frank asked. Boyd pulled out a tablet and opened a folder of screenshots his attorney had been providing. Social media posts, public records, local newspaper mentions, all painting a picture of a family struggling to understand how completely their lives had changed. Dolores had tried to contest the sale of Mitchell Transport, claiming her son was mentally compromised by his cancer treatment. The legal challenge had failed when Boyd's doctors testified about his complete mental competency, leaving her with legal bills she couldn't afford. Laurel's marriage to Troy was already showing strain. Robert Kellerman's hotel business had survived the EPA investigation, but the stress and legal costs had forced him to pull back financial support for the young couple. Troy was working for the first time in his life, selling insurance and struggling with the reality of middle-class income. Trina and Curtis were facing their own challenges. The car dealership had been struggling, and without the anticipated inheritance from Boyd's business sale, they were being forced to downsize dramatically. Madison had to transfer from her expensive private college to a state school, while Connor's plans for an Ivy League education evaporated entirely. "Do you feel guilty?" Frank asked, studying Boyd's expression. Boyd considered the question seriously. "No. They made their choice when they decided I wasn't worth helping. I'm just living with the consequences of their decision. And if they reached out now? If they tried to rebuild the relationship?" Boyd closed the tablet and finished his scotch. "They had their chance to show who they were when it mattered. I don't owe them a second chance to disappoint me." His phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Reyes. Final test results were perfect. The cancer was completely gone, his prognosis was excellent, and he was cleared for full activity, including international travel. Tomorrow, Boyd would fly to Prague to begin a 6-month consulting contract with a multinational corporation, work that would pay him more than his family had thought he was worth in total. After Prague, there was talk of assignments in Singapore, Dubai, perhaps Switzerland. The man his family had dismissed as a simple truck driver was about to become a ghost, wealthy and successful beyond their comprehension, but forever beyond their reach. Boyd Mitchell had learned the hardest lesson of his life. That family was supposed to be the people who stood by you when everything else fell apart. His blood relatives had failed that test completely. But as he prepared for his new life, Boyd realized he wasn't alone. Frank and his team had become the family Boyd had always needed. People who valued competence over pedigree, loyalty over appearance, and who would never abandon someone they cared about when that person needed help most. His old family was welcome to their lives of diminished circumstances and mutual recrimination. Boyd had found something better, a life where his worth wasn't determined by other people's prejudices, and where the people around him had proven themselves worthy of his trust. The bourbon tasted better than it ever had in his old life. Chapter 9. The Final Truth. 2 years after Laurel's wedding, Boyd received an unexpected call while reviewing security protocols for a client in Monaco. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize, but the voice was immediately familiar. Boyd, it's Connor. Please don't hang up. His son's voice was deeper now, more mature, but Boyd felt nothing beyond mild curiosity. How did you get this number? I hired a private investigator. It took months to find you. Boyd, we need to talk. All of us. Mom, Madison, Grandma. Everyone realizes we made a terrible mistake. Boyd walked to the window of his Monaco hotel suite, looking out at yachts in the harbor worth more than his family's combined lifetime earnings. What do you want, Connor? We want to apologize. We want to make things right. Boyd, we didn't understand. You understood perfectly. You understood that I was asking for help, and you decided I wasn't worth helping. But we didn't know about your business, about how successful you really were. There it was. The confirmation Boyd had been expecting. So if you'd known I was wealthy, you would have helped me? Connor's silence stretched uncomfortably. It's not about the money. It's entirely about the money, Connor. You're calling me now because someone finally explained how much I'm worth. If I was still the truck driver you thought I was, would you be calling? Boyd, that's not fair. Answer the question. If you thought I was still broke and dying, would you be trying to rebuild our relationship? The silence gave Boyd his answer. I didn't think so, Boyd continued. You want to know the truth, Connor? I'm worth more money than you can imagine. The business sale was just the beginning. I make more in a month now than Mitchell Transport made in a year. I have homes in 4 countries, investments you've never heard of, and connections that could change your life with a phone call. He could hear Connor's breathing quicken with excitement. But here's what else is true. I wouldn't give you $1 to save your life. Not you, not Madison, not your mother, not my mother, not Laurel. You all made your choice when you thought I was worthless. You get to live with that choice forever. Boyd, please. I'm going to tell you something that might help you understand, Connor. When I was diagnosed with cancer, I wasn't just asking for money. I was asking my family to care whether I lived or died. You all decided my life wasn't worth the inconvenience of helping. Boyd's voice remained calm, conversational, but each word was delivered with surgical precision. So I learned to live without a family. I learned to succeed without your approval. I learned to build relationships with people who value loyalty over appearances. And I learned that blood means nothing if the people who share it won't help you when you're dying. But you're not dying now. No, Connor. I'm not dying. I'm thriving. I'm successful beyond anything I ever imagined when I was building that trucking business to support a family that never appreciated it. But that success has nothing to do with any of you, and none of you will ever benefit from it. Boyd could hear crying in the background, Madison's voice, maybe Trina's. Tell them I said hello, Boyd continued. Tell them I hope they're happy with the choices they made. Tell them I hope Curtis is everything they thought he was, and that their new life is everything they wanted when they decided I wasn't good enough to help. Boyd, what about forgiveness? What about family? Boyd almost laughed. Forgiveness is for people who deserve it. Family is for people who act like family. You failed both tests when it mattered most. So that's it. You're just going to cut us off forever. Connor, I cut you off 2 years ago when you told me to figure out my cancer treatment myself because you had a graduation trip to worry about. This call is just making it official. Boyd hung up and immediately blocked the number. Then he called Frank. They found me, Boyd said. Your family. Connor hired a PI. They want to reconcile now that they understand how much money I have. Frank was quiet for a moment. What do you want to do? Nothing. They made their choice. They can live with it. Boyd, I have to ask, do you ever regret it? The way things ended. Boyd considered the question while watching a $200 million yacht maneuver into the harbor below. Frank, if I'd been the truck driver they thought I was, if I'd died from that cancer while struggling to afford treatment, would any of them have learned anything about loyalty or family or what really matters? Probably not. Then they don't deserve the man I've become. They wanted me to be the failure they could dismiss and ignore. They got their wish. That man is gone forever. Boyd ended the call and returned to his work. Tomorrow he would fly to Singapore for a consulting contract worth more than his entire family's net worth. Next month, Dubai. After that, perhaps Tokyo or London or wherever successful people needed the kind of expertise he'd developed. His family could keep their regrets and their desperate attempts at reconciliation. Boyd had learned the most valuable lesson of his life. that the people who abandon you when you need them most don't deserve to benefit when you no longer need them at all. The bourbon in Monaco tasted even better than it had in Georgetown. And Boyd Mitchell, wealthy, successful, and completely free from the people who'd never deserved him, had never been happier in his life. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.